Hello, Ivy here. Welcome to episode 20. Today we're looking at the escalation of group and cult activity circulating hate online, particularly social media platforms, which then potentially have the risk of going on to progress to a physical attack on their target. First of all, I'll go through the context of today's podcast. As most of my supporters know, I rarely ever do a podcast or an article about anything that has recently appeared in the news. I don't take much interest in the day-to-day activity of any person or group, even when it relates to Meghan and Harry. My focus has always been, and I did it for a living for most of my career, to focus on what are the possible motives behind such activity, who would benefit from it, and is there a pattern of such activity and how far back does it go? Is there an identifiable trend? What have been the possible triggers to set off such activity? And within those triggers, is there an identifiable source, etc.? So I was looking forward to seeing the publication of the initial findings and observations of recent Twitter activity. There's a report that has been talked about for the last couple of weeks by a private company that decided to investigate a little bit more about the haters behind the keyboards. There is clearly more to come, but this podcast and article contain my thoughts on the main themes and the implications and identifiable strategy by someone or a group, and how it confirms my previous podcast relating to the dangers of certain groups forming and the increasing risks behind the motivation and escalating actions of such groups. The first three images are taken from the copyrighted report from the organisation who pulled it all together, led by their CEO, Christopher Boozy, who is doing what Twitter owners should be doing every day. In some ways, I am glad that a third party carried out this investigation, because Twitter has been very slow to react and have removed a minute number of accounts from the 83 identified with proof of being the ringleaders of this dangerous hate activity towards the Sussexes, but mainly Meghan. I am glad that Bot Sentinel Incorporated, which is the company, is independent and can therefore decide which elements are investigated further and can be published. The first image is just the cover of the report. The second one shows a table of contents, which gives an overview, an introduction, refers to primary hate accounts, secondary hate accounts, and lists all of them and their IP addresses, network activity, tweet examples, recruitment efforts, because yes, they are operating in groups and have openly advertised for people to join their groups and present what skills they perceive to have, and how it addresses who follows and who to follow in terms of algorithms. I will hopefully be able to show some of these images whilst the podcast is playing, but if once again that doesn't work, be assured they are all contained in the article, and I have given links at the end of the article to the sources that I've used, and I've also included the complete pack of the images in a PDF which you can just download and have all of them in one place. In terms of the overview of this report, I'll just take a few extracts from it. Since Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, announced their departure from royal life in January 2020, there has been an increase in disinformation and targeted harassment directed at the couple on social media platforms, particularly toward the Duchess. In October 2021, Bot Sentinel Incorporated launched an investigation into the negative Twitter activity concentrated on Harry and Meghan. They set out to determine, 1, if the activity was primarily organic, or if automated accounts pretending to be someone else, or toxic trolls were fueling some or most of the hatred. Second bullet point, how much of this activity originated from single-purpose anti-Meghan and Harry, if these accounts were coordinating their activities. Their research found that a relatively small number of single-purpose anti-Meghan and Harry accounts created and disseminated most of the hateful content on Twitter. However, the primary accounts had assistants that allowed their content to be repackaged and shared by accounts with a considerable following. We observed the primary accounts coordinating their activities and using various techniques to avoid detection. In short, the majority of the anti-Meghan and Harry activity was not organic. The next slide is one of mine taking some information from this report. The report was published on the 26th of October 2021 and found a coordinated campaign of hate and misinformation against Harry and Meghan. The summary of the findings. There were 83 accounts listed, 55 identified as primary accounts. The investigation analysed 114,000 tweets. Over 188,000 followers that were spread between these 83 accounts. Their reach was to 17 million people. 70% of Harry and Meghan hate emanates from these 83 accounts. I then go on to show one of the hate models that I discussed in earlier podcasts, looking at how hate can escalate and the risks that go with each of those stages. One of the sites I visited when I did the initial podcast was the US Department of Justice. A study had been carried out on the psychopathology of hate groups. It was a study and a report by a gentleman called Jack R. Schaefer, MA, and his colleague Joe Navarro, MA. As I said recently, if the FBI and the Department of Justice are using these and more models, and by the way, they are and still are using them, as part of their toolkit of approaches to these groups and individuals who are of concern to them, then where are the international legal organisations and what have they been doing about this phenomenon? That is now on a global increase. The treatment of Harry and Meghan is the tip of the iceberg, but it can be useful for research for decades to come. Let's not wait for victims to stop breathing before we start to investigate and take action against perpetrators and protect and assist their targets. In this model, which when you see the image you will, I'm sure, recall from the previous podcast, and for new members, hopefully you will find this of interest. It's a number of stages that all groups go through. And where it's a hate group, we're going to detail about what can happen, what potentially happens, and what has happened at various stages. So, stage 1, the haters gather. In this research, it's in fact it was found, not all insecure people are haters, but all haters are insecure people. Hate masks insecurities. In terms of Harry and Meghan, the main groups which emerged very quickly in 2016 and have grown over the last 5+ years are as follows. 1. The Royal Rota, the media voice in the tabloids for the British royal family. Televised media. Daily chat shows with invited panel guests spent criticising the Sussexes for not conforming to patterns of behaviour of the rest of the royal family for decades. Regarded as a failure in duty and therefore a traitor to the UK. Use emotional blackmail and language by saying it is an insult to the Queen, who has given decades of service to the UK, etc., etc. These daily shows always use the same phrases and discuss the same topics and the same couple in their anger. Other members of the British royal family are seen as innocent bystanders who are disappointed that this couple wish to be self-financing. Even a member of the family who is wanted by the FBI for credible reasons for questioning is protected by the royal family and the press, and still holds all taxpayer-funded privileges, whereas the Sussexes were stripped of everything that was deemed important to royalists anyway, and was done out of vindictiveness and was meant to hurt, and an attempt at coercive control of persuading Harry to return to the fold. Meghan and the children are only ever mentioned as a token gesture, or when the British royal family and its media are seeking photo opportunities which bring in much-needed income, as so much of their once guaranteed income has moved to the USA media. Following Sussexes being chased out of the UK and continually punished because they have not buckled under the pressure and returned to the abuse behind gilded gates. The UK dropped the bag of guaranteed income and now are petulant that their dangerous games did not work. The next group is government. The next group from them is aristocracy. The next group is keyboard warriors. Daily writing race and hate inciting posts on various social media platforms without challenge. Over the last 4 years or so, the numbers have grown, or rather it is clear that many individuals set up multiple accounts and post hateful things to give the impression that the number of people out there is high. The numbers are becoming dangerous because the ripple effect of their social media content, a drip feed of race baiting. The recent investigation by Bot Sentinel revealed that a total of 83 accounts were responsible for the 70% of the hate-filled tweets about the Sussexes, mainly Meghan. Some groups lose out by the Sussexes leaving, for example, the British royal family and the Royal Rota. Their mission is clear, and it is to protect the way of life that they had before Sussex independence. Like so many of these movements that develop, they are acting from a selfish point of view. They are not concerned about the wishes of individuals. It is about serving the collective for the benefit of the groups which benefit from the current system. Anyone who attempts to change the order of things is targeted in order to make them conform. The monarchy is a cult, something that people are born into and who have no say on what they wish to do with their lives. If the individuals are high in the line of succession, they have next to no freedom of choice. The firstborn is everything and can do no wrong and must be worshipped, and subsequent children are created purely to serve the firstborn. The official term used is to call them spares. Those children have no rights, but would have rights if they were born outside of the monarchy. No one is allowed to leave, and great pressure is placed on anyone who shows any signs of independent thought. This has been discussed in previous podcasts, and the history books are full of suffering of spares over the decades, and how royal life was like being a slave behind gilded gates. All funded by the UK taxpayer, who seem happy to do so, in order to have their figurehead family at the helm, which notionally represented stability and memories of the former British Empire. Stage 2 of this model. The hate group defines itself. Groups formed and were proudly declaring their views on the betrayal of their royal family. all setting up social media accounts on many platforms, proudly announcing they would defend this British way of life. The fact that Meghan was an American and an actress and a feminist and extremely wealthy, and the largest red flag for the majority was that she was a person of colour. Every heading represented factors that royalists could not tolerate, and the race element just sent racists over the edge, that a person of colour was occupying space that was deemed for Caucasian people only. The fact that Meghan was wealthy in her own right, and was therefore not impressed by opulence and quality homes, because she could afford and did buy those things for herself over the years. No other royal bride had come into the firm with that level of wealth and intellect and strong feminist views. It was a bright red flag, and the race element was the final nail. All the various groups denied it was racism from the start. All these years later, those same groups have told on themselves so many times now, they have become a laughingstock on the global stage. A dangerous set of individuals who have been allowed to conduct themselves in such an extreme way and hide behind freedom of speech rhetoric without acknowledging the harm to health and potential for loss of life along the way. This current set of groups are merely following in the practices over the course of history of removing or stopping freedom from the monarchy, and like those before, many of these groups are destroying themselves in their haste to destroy those who wish to leave. Those pressures are now being seen within some of those groups themselves. They are turning on each other. Stage 3. The hate group disparages the target. Hate is the glue that binds the haters to each other and to a common cause. By verbally debasing the object of their hate, haters enhance their self-esteem as well as their group status. After verbal denigration, haters progress to the more acrimonious stage. The publications produced since 2016 have grown steadily worse in their content. Dangerous material, to say the least. We are well past the point where international legal bodies need to step in now. Looking at international intervention, many of the countries that attract interest contain people of colour and also have limited financial means. Poverty is a key element. My thoughts on this are that abusive behaviour is not confined to people living in poverty. Abusers comprise of many societal income stratas. It is a huge error to ignore reports of abuse emanating from a place of opulence and privilege. There is an idea that wealthy people can afford legal assistance, so other people and nations are a priority. If this was not the case, why are the cases that I found in my research, where the international legal community chose to become involved countries that were deeply affected by poverty? I have no issue with these communities receiving intervention by human rights organisations, but I am saying that adults and children have suffered and continue to suffer in places of wealth, and decades later a report is produced about the suffering. It is a bit late for those victims, and how many reports do we all need to see before someone grasps the nettle and gets involved when they hear of possible abuse going on in places now? Who speaks for the victims? Why are abusers ignored because they are wealthy and are friendly with other wealthy individuals? Who speaks for the children who are deliberately brought into the world to serve others and to be foot soldiers for an institution and told that they are not allowed to shine brighter than their older siblings, told that they can never leave and that they are there as a duty to conform to rules that they never had any say in, as well as no say that they were born into a particular family in the first place? Children outside of the royal bubble would have child protection agencies on their doorsteps. Stage 4. The hate group taunts the target. To avoid introspection, haters increase the rhetoric and violence to maintain high levels of agitation. Taunts and offensive gestures serve the purpose. The daily drip-drip effect of propaganda stories in the media, which then get fed around the world, add to the stress of the abused victims 24/7. It led to suicidal ideation for Meghan while she was pregnant with their son, and no one can tell me that is acceptable, just because you have funds. An average of 100 articles a day are written about Harry and Meghan, none of it positive. The comment sections of those newspapers are full of hate, based on the daily feeding of the beast of hate. People have taken their own lives as a result of the UK tabloid press, and we should never forget the part UK media played in the abuse of Princess Diana and her eventual death in 1997. The same thing is happening again with Meghan. Stage 5. The hate group attacks the target with weapons. This stage is critical, differentiates the vocally abusive to physically aggressive, for example, prowling the turf. Adrenaline increases, leads to provoking anger. Anger builds on anger, all done by inciting hatred and negative behaviour in the general population to create an atmosphere of danger. Individuals have appeared here in the UK and abroad with dangerous intentions towards the couple. Do you recall one lady who positioned herself outside the hotel in New York City where the baby shower for Meghan was being held? The individual shouted a number of words at Meghan as she left the building, including one description of charlatan princess, a well-known and used phrase within the Megxit community that formed since 2016. The lady was photographed with and without a facial mask and only appeared to wear the mask and a different coat when she positioned herself close enough to physically attack. A detail that was posted several times in various forums and for which receipts exist, people praising this lady for getting so close, and was only stopped from carrying out the objective because security guards, one in particular, literally blocked her way forward. According to the forums, this individual was attempting to stab Meghan in the stomach to prove that she was not really pregnant. The addition of a mask and the wearing of a different coat was probably done to confuse the identity of someone who had the intention of doing a heinous act of depravity. Earlier in the day, the different attire was clearly for a reason. Meanwhile, back on the social media platforms, this individual was being praised for positioning herself outside the hotel and getting dangerously close to Meghan as Meghan was leaving. This is a clear example of how hate activity can escalate from keyboard methodology, which becomes dangerous and damaging in itself, to morph into the need for actual physical contact and delivery of harm to the targeted victim, encouraged by the rest of the mob sitting behind keyboards. The cruelty during the first pregnancy for the Sussexes was shameful, and the reporting following the news of the miscarriage last year will forever be a stain on the UK and what it has become. Stage 6. The hate group utilises weapons. There's no reason to give details here on this podcast or the article. Everyone knows what that means. Stage 7. The hate group destroys target. The ultimate goal is to destroy the object of their hate. Mastery over life and death gives the hater a sense of self-worth and values, qualities which haters lack. The reality is that hate physically and psychologically destroys the hater and the hated. There is another model that you will see in the article, which refers to Gordon Allport's graphic, displaying how group activity like that shown above, that we've just gone through the stages, can easily turn into a scale of increased hatred based on race and prejudice. So it's set out in a similar way, a number of levels, and it goes into details of how the use of language, stereotypes, rhetoric, how it moves through those scales to dangerous levels where, again, the victim is targeted. Level 1 is about, I said, verbal use, derogatory terms, language use and so on, name calling. Level 2 is avoidance, withdrawal, avoiding contact, making people invisible, acting on prejudice. Level 3 is discrimination, using any power to hand to control who gets what, for example, withholding crucial information, excluding people from jobs, education and or housing. Level 4, physical attack, graffiti, property damage, harassment, physical bullying, rape. Level 5, genocide, ethnic cleansing, murder, suicide. There's more information in the article about those models, about FBI involvement, about the number of law enforcement agencies that use those models in their everyday work. I think you'll find it interesting, and I've also given links in the references of those and similar reports. Harry has spoken in recent documentary, The Me You Can't See, how the ultimate goal is to destroy Meghan, just like the media, UK and international, did with Princess Diana, on the request of the royal family. Even now, members of the media openly say that they want Harry to return to the UK to be with his family, and there is never a request for Meghan and the children to return with him. This strange and evil notion, if Harry was to lose his wife and children through death or divorce, he would somehow forget all of the abuse delivered and contracted to be carried out by others and return to be the whipping boy of the British royal family. It is beyond offensive. These are my perceptions of how certain groups have been given permission, direct or implied, to operate outside of established procedures in the pursuit of two people who are now treated like modern-day runaway slaves. If UK monarchy and its partners in the media are acting like an ex-partner who cannot believe their other half has left, and in doing so is publicly using abusive methods to gain sympathy for those with limited clarity on what is actually happening in front of them. Children who are born first are considered valuable. Others are born to support the firstborn. Children who are not allowed independent thought. Children who are not allowed to fulfill their potential and who must at all times devalue themselves in order to make the firstborn look good. In any other walk of life, treatment of children along those lines would be considered anything but positive, and on several fronts is a breach of human rights. In the article, there is quite a large section about what human rights are, both in graphical, so it's quick for you to look at an image and see an explanation, but also gives examples where human rights has been used in defending at least one member of the royal family, and yet the same legislation has been ignored in terms of Harry and Meghan. Hopefully you'll find that section of interest. In summary, human rights are standards that allow all people to live with dignity, freedom, equality, justice and peace, guaranteed to everyone without distinction of any kind, such as race, colour, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth or other status. Human rights are part of international law, contained in treaties and declarations that spell out specific rights that countries are required to uphold. Regardless of titles, Prince Harry and his family are no less deserving of protection under the law than anyone else. This podcast is an overview of the current vacuum of activity on the international stage, and human rights violations exist in all layers of financial and economic groups. It is a failure of the current system that 5 years later, a family of 4 still have no peace. But at least they have managed to move away and finance a huge security initiative, due to the risk that one member of that family was born into, and the huge increase in risk to the Sussexes' health and safety, and as a direct result that they wished to leave the UK for their mental health and to pay their own way in life. instead of being praised for their bravery to walk away from a way of life and to start again on another continent that should be admired and praised, not vilified. It is an indictment that their lives are still in danger, and that of their children, not least because the British royal family removed their security last year as a punishment for them wanting to move away from the abuse. Abuse created by the monarchy and its arrangement with the tabloid media. Many of the people of the UK don't care either way because they have bigger problems to deal with, like how they put food on the table. Yet despite all that, as long as the royal family remain white, they have no real issue of a person of colour being treated badly, and have no sympathy for Harry because he dared to marry outside the white gene pool where he was supposed to shop. They will happily continue to live in financial difficulties as long as the UK emblem family stays white. It seems to give some kind of comfort and memories of the empire. I ask USA elected officials to think seriously about what is happening to USA family on USA soil. A 5-year campaign of hatred which shows no signs of abating without loss of life somewhere. The events of the 6th of January on the Capitol building gives you an idea of the similar forces being played out in the UK. Leaving the EU is part of this belief system. Harry and Meghan and their children are entitled to be protected under the law like everyone else. What is happening is not right. This couple have a history of community engagement and philanthropy. I always get that word wrong, my apologies. Artwell is already in its first year of operation, working on so many global projects. I would like to see the international legal community give them reasonable safety and protection under the law as a recognition of this growing problem around the world. Hate groups are forming without challenge. This cannot continue. Please assist in this matter in any way that you can, quickly, before loss of or destruction of lives. In the article you will see that I've used one of my favourite academic models, the 7 Stages of Grief model by Kubler-Ross. I've put it in there as a framework to show how the royal family and the royal rota reacted to Meghan and Harry announcing that they would be stepping back from royal duties and becoming self-financing. I also put together a table mapping activity against each of the 7 stages. In view of the subject matter of the accompanying podcast, I thought you may wish to look at that too, so I've included that in the reference material at the end of this article. Here are a couple of direct quotes from the Bot Sentinel report. Quotes from the CEO. We will enable the ability to export the list of accounts to a CSV file after tweaking a few things. If these accounts want to organise and attack others, they will be monitored by over 100,000 Bot Sentinel users while doing it. There is no more hiding in plain sight. Lastly, when these accounts change their Twitter handle or deactivate their accounts, the list will automatically update daily with the recent changes. In other words, trying to change your Twitter handle to avoid detection will not work. Hopefully this has given you enough of an interest to explore further. I have given a link for you to download the full report from Bot Sentinel. And I said all of the images that I have referred to, I've used a few of them in the article, but the whole set is contained in links in the reference sources. I've PDF'd them so they'll all come up together. I've PDF'd another document with some overheads that I've put together from the report, and I have listed a host of websites where you can explore further any of the models that I've referred to, and the FBI toolkit are at least bits that they've released for the public for you to explore further, because that was quite interesting to me when I did that earlier in the year. Other than that, as I said, let's see what happens on Twitter. I hope it then expands to other social media platforms. But for now, those 83 accounts that have been identified, it's been very, very interesting in the last couple of days to watch how they are performing, falling out with one another, threatening all kind of legal action. And when you think of what they were doing was illegal anyway, it's quite amusing. It really is. And if you're not on Twitter, you will see from the report the kind of things, because they've given examples of many of the tweets that they've been doing and their activity and how they recruit. It's really very, very well organised. And my feeling on this subject is, who is at the top of this? Well, in fact, I'm 100% certain it's who is the top of it, but I asked the question rhetorically. What I would say is that there are many levels within these groups, and as we have said, from which I've explained in the actual academic models, but in terms of those on Twitter, when you read their tweets and you see how the interaction between different groups, they're all in teams, it's all set up, it's very, very well organised, and a good proportion of them receive payments for their activity, enough for them to give up their full-time work and buy houses out of it. So we're not talking about a small amount of money. There's a lot of money being put behind just these that we see on Twitter, and we know that they use the same tweets or sort of words on other forums elsewhere. So there is money coming from the top, and I very much doubt that the majority of levels in these groups know the names of individuals in the levels ahead of them, above them, let alone who's right at the top of the whole tree, because you can be quite certain that the people at the top are very well protected, and they will be known, I would think, to a handful of people, and that's all. But the more you look at the report and the more you read into it and see some of the things that they've been posting to one another and how they've gone about it, you realise, when it goes into millions in terms of coverage, the damage that they potentially could do. I'm just pleased that Meghan had a whole life and a career, a very successful career, and was quite affluent through her hard work long before she met the family of death, which, other words, is the royal family, because this campaign would have destroyed someone who didn't have that wealth of evidence beforehand to prove that everything that has been said that's negative, really, really awful things that they've claimed against Meghan in the last 5 years has not been backed up by all the years before. They really haven't. And any family members on either of the families, because they're both garbage, they have their own axes to grind as to why they're saying what they're saying. But people with a brain, common sense, and actually know and work and are friends with Meghan, none of them have got those things to say. Even one that was offered £70,000 to say he'd done various things with Meghan, he turned that down, was not interested, and made it known that he was approached by a certain tabloid, and that's what they were willing to pay him to lie. So, yeah, it's a big problem, it's dangerous, and I can't love that couple anymore, but particularly Meghan, because I cannot think of many people who would still be standing after 5 years of this, when you know the things that they're talking about you haven't done. You're not in any way that character that they're painting, but it's the forces, all of those groups that I identified, I listed earlier on in this podcast. When you have government, royal family, tabloids, and powerful groups, let alone the keyboard warriors that came along afterwards, but even the keyboard warriors, as we've found out from this report, they are very, very organised, and their reach goes into millions, and it's lies, hate, racism, all sorts of headings that we know about. Dangerous, dangerous people. And once again, I shall end this podcast by saying, the international legal community, you're left wanting at the moment, and I will never, ever stop saying that in any forum that I have, any platform that I have. It's long overdue now. It's just long overdue. And it's not acceptable. There is no reason that can be given to justify it. So please, somebody, do something. Speak to someone. If you're not in the legal profession, but you know people that work in that international setting, make them aware, share links of the podcast, anything. Any podcast for that matter. But I just feel now enough is enough. And just seeing this initial report, and I know we're going to get more details from it, but just seeing what we've seen from 83 accounts that's going into 17 million people's sort of eyesight and view. No, this has to stop. We have to do something, and ordinary people like myself can only do so much. I'll continue to do it, but there are people with a higher platform and the legal backing behind them to do a lot more. It's time. I will now go back and become calm again. Thank you very much for listening. I hope I haven't gone on too long, and I'll speak to you next week. Bye for now. Bye from Ivy. Bye.